Now, as a, you know, as a genealogist wannabe, I and my wife have traveled looking for in cemeteries all over this country for our heritage, and so coming into North Carolina here, there's so much more history here because it was a colonial state before we became a country. I'm just so excited about the possibility, the things being done in research to find first revolutionary soldiers that are in this area, and so I'm the registrar for the local Winston-Salem Bethabara chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, and we are trying to find all the graves we can of revolutionary soldiers in this area. And so we're doing that, and so I wanted to mention that. But also, in my group, I'm also camp commander of the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. And we're doing the same thing with Civil War North Union veterans, searching for them. I came into this area knowing that we would have deaths showing up in the 4 national cemeteries, and that, you know, basically deaths occurred in North Carolina from fighting, and I knew that basically that some of the soldiers that came here or came back to the, you know, came here to North Carolina, or they just came after the war to North Carolina from a northern state, there would be graves for those kind of soldiers in this state. I didn't realize there would be graves of North Carolinians that were Union supporters. That's a real interesting take. And so I'm going to ask my wife to come forward, Kathy, and because we're a team on doing research in this area. And go on over and do this.
So, we're going to talk about genealogy. I think it's appropriate since we're the Forsyth County Genealogical Society. But Bill is so right. We have traveled all over the United States. And in fact, I'll let you in on a little secret. Well, it's not a secret. Our honeymoon, we spent traveling to Civil War sites in the United States. We ended up in Louisiana at New Orleans, but yes. So I guess when you're young and in love, you will do anything. But we've made a good team because I've learned so much history that I would never have learned before or never known before. And it's, after 45 years, we're still a team. But anyways, here's the genealogy part of this talk. What we did is we went and looked up, we went to find a grave and we looked up individuals that were in it. I'll let you read through here, but this individual, there's his gravestone. He was originally from Forsyth County. He was a mechanic and 30 years old. He's buried in Rural Hall. Isn't that right? Yeah, he's buried in Rural Hall. And married twice, got pensions. That's the other thing that's interesting, and I think you've got these slides on that, don't you? Where we get a lot of information is from the pension records. So there's the first one. Okay. Here's another one. He died in Yankton County when he was and he's buried also in Yadkin County. Again, there's his gravestone. He survived the war, went on to have 13 children. Happy family.
Is he a relative, that Wooten? Is he a relative, the Wooten?
None,
Oh, okay.
none of these are
Are
relatives.
you, okay, I thought maybe this,
Okay.
okay.
Here is another one for your information. It's Edward Sink. Now, Sink is a common name around this area, I found. Again, he was from Clemens. He died in Clemens. And he's buried in Clemens, in Mary Torrance. So, again, gravestone looks like it could use a little help, but another one. And then this final one is interesting because it actually shows a gravestone supplied by the government. That's a typical Civil War gravestone with a rounded top. And it'll have the company and what company he was with, what infantry, if he was in the infantry, and so forth. Now, I think all of these that we're showing you were in the 3rd North Carolina Mounted Infantry. Yeah. And he's buried in East Bend. So, you know, one can't help but wonder, when these young men left, when they came home, what was the you know, the family dynamic, or what were the family dynamics even before they left? That's another thing that's kind of interesting. So with that, I'll let you continue, and you'll see me one more time.
I must give rebuttal.
Now,
We got to enjoy the nightlife of Nashville,
true,
Natchez,
that's true.
and
New
New
Orleans.
Orleans.
Yeah.
So, well, come to the last 4 units. What happens is in September 17th, 1862, that is the bloody day of Antietam. And Lee had made his first entry into northern states going to Antietam. And he was repulsed by McClellan, General McClellan, and his troops at Antietam. That teed up the opportunity for Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And what the Emancipation Proclamation said is if these secessionist states do not resolve and come back into the Union by the end of December, we will treat all individuals that come in within our military lines as emancipated people. And so, basically, it was a war measure, and he could only do that with a significant Union victory. And he was saying, basically, we would like to end this, if we can end this before the end of the year, we'll talk about it. So, a key thing, and right away what happens is that the governor of Massachusetts, Governor John Albion Andrew, puts together the 54th and the 55th Massachusetts, which would be freedmen in Massachusetts, put those units together to start using black men in the Civil War. Now, there's going to be a number of pickup points in this all the way along. These men have to be put through training. They have to have be leadership, because basically, their officer corps will be all white men. And so there will be no officer that is a black man. The possibility for black men in these units is they could become a corporal or they could become a sergeant, but they will not progress any higher in service. And then the leadership is basically based on the white people that come in as officers. Do they respect the blacks? Do they think they can do the job? Or do they have questions about that? So it's really, it's going to be an interesting process that they go through with that. Supply, obviously, as the numbers of black soldiers come in, they've got to supply them with clothing and with arms, and that's, basically the arms portion. There's going to be part of the times when black troops don't have any guns for a long period of time, but have to go through training. They will get some inferior guns, and then finally, at some later point, they'll get better weapons to work with. And so we've got supply, and then basically, will the officers use them? And so that's in battle. And that just doesn't come right away. So there are 4 units formed in North Carolina. The first one is in June of '63, and it's the 1st Regiment of North Carolina Volunteers of African descent. It's organized in Newburgh. And what will happen, the next regiment starts to be organized. So enlistments are happening in these other 2 units during this time, starting while the 1st regiment is there. But and I'll explain why it happens, is that when they finally move it in as an organized unit, it takes place in Portsmouth, Virginia, in October of '63. And then that's the same thing for this unit. It's organized in Norfolk, and that's January of '64. Now this regiment, the 1st Regiment of Heavy Artillery, North Carolina Volunteers of African descent, there's recruiting that starts in mid-'64. It'll be a totally North Carolina group, but it takes a while for that group to get organized. And so what happens is in 1864, on February 8, '64, all existing Confederate regiments are nationalized into the national service. So from that date going forward, the first becomes the 35th, the second becomes the 36th, the third becomes the 37th Colored Troops. And then later, not really until 1865, will what's called what was the 1st North Carolina Heavy Artillery will be renamed the 14th Regiment. And so, basically, you have, what does the Emancipation Proclamation bring? Over 200,000 men to the cause. This was the number of troops. So the blacks were willing to sign up, participate in the war, and die in the war. Now, the first volunteer, at the end of their training, they were the 55th Massachusetts came to New Bern, and they were supposed to stay a week and help train the new recruits. They all basically, the Army, you go where you're told, when you're told. So they were only allowed 1 day of training between the two groups. But it was still, basically for the green troops of the 1st North Carolina to be in with troops that were ready to go into action, and seeing how they marched and performed and all that had to be just a fabulous education for them. And so what happens is, after they continue the training of the 1st Regiment, and when they're ready, most of the regiment goes to Folly Island, South Carolina. The 54th and the 55th are going into Charleston, and Folly Island is close by, but basically it's another area by Charleston, and that's where most of the 1st is sent, by the way. There are several companies that are left in New Bern, and they will do some raiding along the Wilmington and Weldon in July of '63, and then in eastern North Carolina in October through the end of the year. They're in action. So moving ahead, when they moved to Portsmouth, they make raids down into North Carolina, and then all the units of the 1st North Carolina are sent down to Florida, and along basically Lake City is west of Jacksonville, and there's a railroad along that line, and so there will be this battle of Olustee in February 20th, '64, and there will be deaths incurred in that action. After that campaign, they're moved to the St. Johns River, which is a river that flows north in Florida, and is the outlet at Jacksonville. And then they move to James Island, South Carolina, and are in action there in July. And they raid from Jacksonville to areas around Baldwin in July, and then they raid on a Florida railroad in August '64. Then they moved to Jacksonville, from Jacksonville to the Hilton Head for a period of time, and then they're sent into Boyd's Neck, and then we'll have area which is in South Carolina, and then they will be in the Battle of Honey Hill, and there will be deaths during that battle in the unit. And after that battle, they are returned to Jacksonville, Florida, and they will be there until March '65. And then they're asked to do duty in Charleston. And this will be a problem. In Reconstruction, black soldiers will go into some of the towns, major communities in the South, and they're there to, provide order. Well, they're not well received by the population. And so what happens, here, they will be actually mustered out on June 1st, 1866. Now, where did these slaves and possibly emancipated black men come from? Again, a large number from the coastal area, and then the basically major cities in the coastal area, but even from Lexington and Charlotte. And then there were a few blacks that came from different states, including what I've shown there. Now, here, this goes back to our research into the area. So, yeah, come on.
Okay, these are representative of records that are available on these black soldiers. Now, unfortunately, all of these individuals we're sharing with you have passed away or were killed in action. Well, I guess one had smallpox. Yeah. Right, and on the right, this shows you a descriptive, you can't read it very well, but it's a description that was written of soldier's name, where he was killed in action, a little bit of background information on that person. But not all the records follow this same format. Hard to find information about where they were before. Knowing the challenges with African American genealogy, it's hard to go back one more step. So here again are two other, or this is one of 29 soldiers. Again, the difference between death reporting. Unfortunately, like I said, you know, it's sad to know that they were emancipated, they gave up their life, and it was in their minds, for a very good cause. Okay, here's another one killed at that Honey Hill that Bill mentioned. Now this gives you an idea of what a pension record would look like. If you've done any genealogy where you might have Civil War ancestries, this is a widow. She has applied for a pension. The soldier could also apply for a pension. He would be called an invalid. That would be the line above. But he was deceased at this time. So she, the widow, applied for a pension. She must have also applied for a minor child's pension, but the government said no, it does not apply. So they kicked that one out. But again, this gives you an idea of that they were also, the African American soldiers are also eligible for these pensions. Anything else?
So the 35th had over 1,200 soldiers in it. There were 50 deaths, basically those two areas that they fought in. They had 50 more contagious deaths, and they had a few from the diseases. So they lost about 15% of their regiment. The deserters was very small. This was a very active group. Now the 2nd Regiment they take place in detached service in North Carolina, and then they go up to Portsmouth, and then they raid in the south and into North Carolina. Then another detachment went to Polly Island, and the other 80 Union regiments. And then they did duty in Norfolk and Portsmouth until April '64. They were first assigned to Confederate prison guard duty at Point Lookout, Maryland. And no Southern prisoner liked to have a black man tell them what to do, so that was hazardous duty. They moved down to the Rappahannock River and were there in June of '64. And then they were moved to the Bermuda 100 under General Butler in July of '64. They take place in siege operations against Petersburg and Richmond from '64 to '65. And they would be in the battle at Chaffin's Farm, Newmarket Heights, and Deep Bottom on 29th and 30th of 1864. And there are 2 black veterans of the 36th Infantry that received the Medal of Honor. The first one here is Miles James. He's a sergeant. He received the Medal of Honor for his actions at Chaffin's Farm. This is a memorial. We do not know where he's buried, but we do know when he died. But this is a memorial for him there. And in the case of James Gardner, he also is a sergeant in Company I of the 36th. And he dies in 1905. And his life's road took him to Iowa. And so this grave is actually in Iowa. Now the 36th, they continue in action after Deep Bottom. They're at Fair Oaks and Dutch Gap, Virginia. They have detachments having action down in Indiantown and Sandy Creek, North Carolina. They have duty north of the James River before Richmond. And then they are in the Appomattox campaign, and they will go on to occupy Richmond in April and May of '65. And after the complaints of the citizenry of Richmond, this unit is sent on to Texas in May and June through June '65. And they will be in duty there until they are 28, 1866. So with that, this unit had over 1,100 soldiers. There were 50 deaths militarily, 54 contagious. A number of soldiers died in 1866 of cholera in Texas. And so 15% of their total died and have deaths. And the deserters, because now we're looking at a time when they're there, the war is over in '65, and we're moving into '66, but still, they only had a 3.3% deserters. And listed is 256 soldiers who received bounties in this group. Now, the 3rd Regiment, they're in duty at Norfolk and Portsmouth. They will move into Westmoreland County, Virginia in '64. They will support Butler in the campaign capture of Fort Powhatan in May of 64, and they will also be in duty at Wilson's Wharf there. And then they are also involved in the battles of Chaffin's Farm and Newmarket Heights and Deep Bottom. And then they stayed in the trenches in between Richmond and Petersburg. And then they are sent at the end of the year to be part of the first expedition to attack Fort Fisher. That's not successful, so they're also involved in the second expedition, which leads to the capture and eventually of Fort Fisher. And they are involved in conflict at Sugarloaf Hill and Federal Point and Fort Anderson, and they're in Wilmington in February. And then they are involved in the link-up of General Sherman and his troops coming into the Carolina. And so that takes them to basically the end of the war, and they march through Kingston and Goldsboro, and they advance on Raleigh in April. They will be there when Joseph Johnston surrenders his army at Bennett's house near Durham. They have duty in North Carolina and at multiple locations between 65 and 66, and they aren't mustered out until February 11, 1867. Now, again, 37th, because they end up recruiting also, they've recruited in North Carolina, but they also have recruited in Virginia, that they have a good number of soldiers that are from Virginia. And so, again, this is the coastal area, basically here, and the towns of the coastal area are main places where those soldiers came from. They picked up some soldiers from Maryland, from Mississippi, from Georgia, a few from Kentucky, and a few from Massachusetts. I found this interesting, is that a good number of these individuals had professions. And it's very interesting. They had several names for the mariners. So they would be a mariner, they would also say it was a sailor, and they would be a boatman. And so you can see, basically these individuals are going to do well in the post-war time, because they've got professions. So the 37th, it's over 1,200 soldiers. They have a higher desertion rate, but they're serving after the war is over and in through Reconstruction. So basically, they had 65, mustered out 67 to decide on whether this is too much. But 604 received bounties, so about half the unit, just under half, and there was a special bounty given for freedmen. So if they had been freed from slavery before April 19th, 1861, those soldiers, which they're not identified in this group, but they would have received a $100 bonus, and so they might be mixed in here. But the record as it was given didn't identify. And then the last unit, basically, through the middle of 64 on into late 64, they're gathering recruits, but they don't really put them in action until March 17th, 1865, and they'll muster out in December 65. But they are serving in various locations within North Carolina. And so these soldiers come basically from the coastal area, and there are some South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi individuals in the group. Here, the main listing is farmer and laborer, or laborer, but there are, again, some people that have professions that they work at. So this soldier group, that's 1,200, over 1,200 soldiers. There's a little higher desertion rate, but again, they don't get out till late, they some of them really get out before before they're mustered out. There's no deaths in this area as far as military, but 48 succumbed to contagious diseases, and so there's 157 deaths, about 13%. 65% of the soldiers receive these bounties, and here we know that 123 of those individuals that received bounties, they were freedmen. So basically, they were willing to fight for the cause. Now, just to sort of give you an idea here, I looked into, well, where did the regiments come from that were Union? Well, every state in the South would have at least one Union regiment or company, and basically North Carolina has the four that are created as North Carolinians, and Louisiana, which also basically was taken in 1862, had black units before nationalization. And the interesting thing is that South Carolina, Alabama is what I want to say. Alabama, in 1862, there was an area of Alabama that had Union troops that were in existence in 1862 to the end of the war. And that's amazing. So that basically, look at this, at least 65 units fought from within the South. I looked at all the records for every state, and there was only one state, well, it wasn't a state actually, there was one area that had some Confederate, it was the Arizona Territory, had 200 and some individuals who were Confederates, but they also had about 600 that were Union. And that's the only place I found them outside of the South. Now, so these 11 states decided to take on 23 states and the District of Columbia. There are Union forces from 23 states plus the District of Columbia. The border states, I put in here a Confederate number. No, the Confederate number is in parentheses. So Maryland provided seven regiments to the Southern cause, but had 27 Union regiments. Kentucky provided 35, but they had 66 Union. And Missouri had 71 Confederate groups and 35 of Union. And of course, in 1863, West Virginia became a state. There were 44 regiments created in Virginia after it became a state, and there were no further revs available there. So basically, the manpower, when you take this into consideration, that people were willing to serve in the South for the Union cause, that there's over 200,000 black men that are willing to serve. And in the state of North Carolina, there are 20 Grand Army of the Republic posts. They were proud of their service. There are 20 regiments. Well, I should call regiments posts that are created, and this is in 1910. So these men, if they were 20 at the time the war ended, 1865, that's 55 years later. That makes them around 75, one way or the other. And they're proud of their heritage. So there are, it's an interesting thing that there are, and I will also say that we don't know the makeup of the individual camps. Basically, this is an organization that basically was going to die out because you had to be a veteran to be in it. And so the numbers died down. And we don't have the individual camp records. We've got some records through newspaper and other things. So we know there were the 20, there were national reports, so we know that there were 20 posts in North Carolina. We know some of them were totally black camps, but we do not know for sure whether there were any mixed camps in North Carolina. I don't know if we'll ever know, but that's interesting. So this is much more, there's a Union heritage here, and there should be at least maybe one or two persons in this room might have somebody that served in the Union Army from North Carolina. So I'll leave you with that. I've got a couple things for the Sons of Union Veterans. Our big ceremony is we go down to the National Cemetery in Salisbury. And because that is the location of the North Carolina Confederate prison for Union soldiers. And basically in May 1864 through March 65, there were a large number, the camp was overrun in numbers. And there are over 5,000 deaths we know that happened there. There could be more. And they basically put them in trenches in the National Cemetery. So if you go to the old part of the National Cemetery in Salisbury, there's a wonderful field, looks like a football field. It's just beautiful grass. But there are 18 trenches with soldiers buried there. And so we do a ceremony there on Memorial Day at 10 o'clock. So with that, are there any questions?